Hello everyone and welcome back to Nintendo Everything Refresh, where we refresh your memory on what is new and exciting in the world of Nintendo. This is episode 22 and joining me this week are Luiz Estrella.
Hello everyone, a pleasure to be here as always, and a message to you all, please play Xenoblade 3.
Alright Luiz, thank you for that PSA.
Just wanted to open with that.
Just wanted to throw that out there. No, that's good, that's good. And then we have also got Nicolas Shade.
Hey everyone, and this is your daily reminder to please play Xenoblade 3.
Excellent. And we do not have Dennis Gagliardato here, not this week. I don't know what his PSA would be. I think he's also playing Xenoblade 3, but I'm not quite sure.
He plays a lot of stuff, but he's probably also
He plays a lot of stuff. Yeah. But I'm sure if Dennis was here, he would also recommend you play Xenoblade 3. All right, so we've got a pretty good show this week. Well, I mean, I certainly hope so, since y'all are here listening. But we're going to kick things off with something a little bit different. We are going to talk about what would a hypothetical Nintendo metaverse look like. Feels like the metaverse is in the news every single week, and I feel like it's such a opaque concept that not a lot of, there's not a lot of like agreement over what the metaverse will actually be someday. So we're just going to throw our ideas into the ring and see what that could look like. And then in the back half of the show, we've got all kinds of news, a little bit of Nintendo news, a little bit of just weird gaming industry news in general. So before we get to that, let's talk about this whole metaverse thing. So the reason why this kind of came into my head this week was because Facebook, they have their version of the metaverse that they're trying to build, their Facebook Horizon Worlds thing. And Mark Zuckerberg was posting about it on Twitter, and he posted a picture of his avatar. And people were like, the graphics for like that game are just really not great. And people were making fun of like his avatar. He showed off his like Mark Zuckerberg avatar, and he was like so proud of it. But people were like, oh, this looks like, PS1 graphics or whatever.
It looks like an NPC.
Yes, it looks like an NPC. Which is like a good reminder that everyone's talking about the metaverse, but it's still very much in its infancy. And we don't really know what a hypothetical Nintendo metaverse would look like. So I just kind of wanted to throw the question out there and see what we could all come up with. The first thing that always jumps into my mind is this idea of the metaverse is always so closely connected with VR, which Nintendo doesn't really have a big presence in. But I don't know. How would you guys define the metaverse? What do you guys see that looking like?
To be honest, the whole metaverse concept still feels a little I did not quite grasp exactly what it is, I think that's the same for a lot of people. It feels a little, what exactly is the goal here? What they're trying to make?
Mm-hmm.
It is is this a substitute for real life? What they are actually going to do here? But every time I see stuff from it, I see that it's basically stuff like reunions in work or stuff like that. They are actually in a virtual room where everyone's seeing their little, the one that Mark Zuckerberg posted, his NPC. Everyone has their motto in that world. And when we talk about Nintendo, I think the closest thing that I can think of is the Universal Park, the Super Nintendo World, because I think I don't know if you guys already saw how it works in the park and stuff like that, but there's a lot of interactions where your cell phone and you do stuff in the park and you get points in your cell phone and stuff like that. So there's this connection of extended reality, I think, where you do stuff in real life and it gets represented in the virtual world. So I think when thinking about Nintendo, when you talked about that idea, I imagine something like an expansion of the park, or a space where you have all these Nintendo brands and you can do stuff, and you probably can buy NFTs of Nintendo characters and stuff like that. So to me, it doesn't sound very good to me, but that's more or less how I'm imagining it. Because for them to actually get in the worlds, I think for a company to get into that, I think they have to profit. They have to make some form of profit. So I wonder if they're going to do something like that. But it is really confusing. It is really complex to me, the idea.
The only thing I know is that if Nintendo made a metaverse, it would have friend codes and limited online functionality.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
That's really on the nose. No, I really like that take on in real, like a real life take on that, because like there's a bunch of different definitions of the metaverse, but it's often described as like a bunch of 3D virtual worlds that are all like kind of separate, but also all kind of interconnect. But I guess if you like take that like other way of looking at it, like, yeah, in a sense, a theme park is kind of a metaverse. You've got all these separate themed worlds, and then especially when you get in with the interaction with your phone or with your Switch or whatever, that's really interesting. I've never thought of it that way before. What's your take on it, Nicholas? Are you thinking just all the stuff that gamers love these days, like blockchain and NFTs and, you know?
Those lovely things. I mean,
those lovely things.
Yeah, it's difficult. Because, as we've said, it's not exactly an established concept. I guess the first question is, what is the purpose of it, right? Because a lot of the things we're seeing nowadays in the media and whatnot is kind of like, use the metaverse in your daily life, use it for work, use it for stuff like that. If it was Nintendo doing it, that definitely wouldn't be the purpose. It would be something focused around entertainment, around gaming, probably. And I think in that regard, Luiz actually has a really good idea in terms of kind of bringing that into the world by having these this sort of real life interaction. Other than that, I like the first thing that comes to mind is, you know, a VR type system. And like at that point, what exactly differentiates a metaverse from what currently exists in terms of things like VR chat rooms?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I could almost picture, like, at least to me, I feel like this idea of the metaverse is kind of inextricable from VR, and maybe that's just because of, like, how it's been portrayed in science fiction and things like that. But, like, I always picture, like, a Ready Player One type thing, where, like, you're putting on this headset, and you're, like, whisked away to this super immersive experience, and so, you know, I almost picture it being like this thing where, like, all right, you're in this big hub world, and then you've got like Nintendo themed virtual worlds, and you've got Sony's themed virtual worlds, et cetera, et cetera. And you can go and you can be like, all right, I'm like chilling in my virtual apartment, and let's all go hang out and go do a Legend of Zelda side quest in Hyrule together in first person VR, and then we'll go and we'll hop into the Metroid world, and you know, like that's kind of what I picture in my head. Which makes me think it would never happen, but...
You know, when you put it that way, it just sounds like Nintendo Land.
Yeah.
Kinda.
You mean like the Wii U game?
Yeah, that's honestly... I could see that, honestly, in terms of having that kind of... If they use it as, I don't know, I guess some kind of launcher or, like, platform, I could see it being something akin to that, where you have all these different parks or themed things that you go into. Maybe even have it be a mix of like what Universal is doing and that, where you have these almost theme park like attractions. So I think that would help kind of justify the use of VR if you had these more, I guess, realistic type experiences.
Yeah, I think the big thing that Nintendo Land doesn't had was online compatibility, right? It was a couch multiplayer game. So that concept with a online play, like where you see your friends in a hub space and you can talk to them with all that VR stuff, that could be really, really fun. Even if you were like more, how can I say, more flesh out experiences, because Nintendo Land was mostly like mini games. Some experiences had more to it, but in general it was mini games. But imagining those grand adventures, it would be really fun. Now, the thing that I'm what makes me not to think a lot about gameplay is because usually when we see metaverse, like from Facebook, I don't know if you guys ever saw the little characters, but they don't even have legs. So they are really more like social interactions, you know. It's hard for me to imagine something to the level of Ready Player One, where there's all those
Right.
crazy actions, really action-based games. And I think that could be the next
Especially-
step.
Well, and especially considering that Nintendo's first VR headset was literally made out of cardboard. Well, I guess their first one was the Virtual Boy. Their second one was made out of cardboard.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know if that's a step forward
Which
or
one
a
was
step back
worse?
for them. Yeah, no, that's a good point. There is a big emphasis on social interaction, not just on being playing these games, right? Like we can do now. I guess in a way, it does like share a lot of like similarities to an MMO, but just kind of like a step beyond that. And I guess, Luiz, you mentioned like the idea of like, oh, the metaverse is also designed, in theory, maybe someday it'll be the space where like you can work and things like that. And that reminded me of, there was a point where Nintendo was doing like some weird like experimental things. Like, do you guys remember Nintendo at one point, they announced like they were going to make like this device to like monitor your sleep?
Yeah,
Do you guys
I
remember
remember
that?
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
It was a
the-
Wii thing, I think.
well, so
Around the
for
Wii era, but
I think it
It
was
was
on the
around
Wii
that
U.
era, yeah.
Iwata was always talking about it in the reunions with investors and stuff like that, but it never came to a reality.
It never came out, but I really am wondering like what was going through their heads, because there was a point in time, where Nintendo was making a lot more than video games, and so if they were to kind of like take on this bigger approach to like, oh, we're just going to create this service for people, that's kind of what I'm picturing in my head now that you mentioned that, Luiz.
Yeah, no, you brought a great point, because I'm not sure if Nintendo has said something like that in the more recent investors meeting, but for a long time, Iwata would say in those meetings that Nintendo was not a video game company, but an entertainment company. So,
Right.
like, in the Wii era, in the Wii U era, where they were with those games like with fitness, like Wii Fit and stuff like that, they were really trying to go for a more broad audience. With lifestyle products and stuff like that, and I think the whole this sleep mechanism that they were creating and never came out was probably along those lines. So I could really see Nintendo from that time trying something like that, but I don't know if they still have that mindset now that the Switch is so successful. I would say bringing a community really focused on the video game department. Like, people are really just playing the games, although we still have stuff like Ring Fit Adventure, right, which is like just sold more than 14 million, I think, units. So maybe Nintendo still want to try something like that. I think the biggest issue that I see here is the VR thing. I don't see Nintendo investing on that in the moment, because it still is super expensive, and not only expensive but kind of clunky to use, because there's so many cables to install the thing and to use that. So I don't see them doing that right now, but maybe in the future.
right. I mean, also from
Yeah.
a power department, the Switch just is not. It does
Oh,
not
yeah.
really have the specs to be able to handle that, and they're going to need a much more powerful console if they want to be able to do something from that angle.
Yeah, I can't really see them making their own dedicated VR hardware, but I could kind of see them, like, if there was this big kind of like platform agnostic service where all the game companies had some kind of in-game representation, I could see Nintendo getting in on something like that. Maybe if it had matured to the point where like that's where everyone is, we need to put our brands on this service so that other people can interact with them still, then I could see it. But yeah, I can't imagine it's something they're like actively working on right now.
It's similar to mobile, right? We never expected Nintendo to go mobile, but now they have a lot of official Mario games, Animal Crossing, Fire Emblem, all of those brands that usually were locked to Nintendo consoles. Now they are in any mobile phone. So if there's a platform that everyone is in there, I could see Nintendo producing software for that.
Totally. Well, it sounds like no matter what, like if we ever see a Nintendo take on the metaverse, it's going to be quite a ways away, because this is still like a thing that is like it's mostly, when you hear metaverse, it's really mostly being used as a buzzword at this point. But I think the idea behind it has a lot of potential. for gaming. And at some point, if it gets big enough, I feel like Nintendo's going to have to do something with it, but who knows if or when that will occur.
Yeah, Nintendo usually is the last one to jump in the boat, right? So if it really is successful in the future, I can see then after everyone else already is there, I can see they trying something with it.
Yeah, well, except for when they're not, though. I mean, Nintendo was also... there have been plenty of periods where they've been extremely innovative and brought a ton of new
when they are
out,
they are like creating, they are always innovative. But when everyone else is doing something, Nintendo is always like, I don't know if I'm going in that direction. Right. they are always in their own thing, usually, most of the time.
Yeah. No, I think that's very true. All right. Well, thanks for humoring that idea, guys. I was excited to talk about that. And if we catch wind of a Nintendo metaverse, to all of our listeners out there, we'll let you know. In the meantime, let's take a trip down memory lane here. I want to talk about the latest game added to Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack, Wave Race 64. This, as you can probably glean from the title, is a Wave Race game that came out on the Nintendo 64. But we have not gotten a ton of Wave Race games, and it's one of those franchises that I kind of forget exists, like on a day-to-day basis. The last Wave Race game we got was Blue Storm on the GameCube. And we don't really get a ton of these arcade-style racers that are not Mario Kart, So I'm really glad to see them bring this game to the service, because we don't get a lot of games like this from them anymore.
I mean, it's interesting that we have so many of these old Nintendo franchises. There's all the obvious ones that people clamor for all the time, the F-Zeros, the Pikmins, the obvious contenders. But then Nintendo has produced a lot of smaller franchises that you might not immediately think of, and I mean, like you said, one of these is Wave Race. And you have to wonder, like, is this basically just them, is this them filling out their back catalog on the service? Do they intend on doing more with this? Like, what is it just people getting a little taste of that nostalgia of what it was like back then?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the past, mostly on the NES and on the SNES, I think Nintendo was kind of the one publishing all those main sports games for those consoles, like baseball, soccer, a lot of stuff like that, games that didn't had Nintendo characters, Nintendo faces in the actual game. And I think it was really fun at the time, but then when other companies started to produce those sports games like EA and 2K and stuff like that we have nowadays, and they started to get everything to another level, I think Nintendo kind of changed the focus to their own characters, to those games where their brand is strong, like Mario, like Kirby, like Zelda and stuff like that. But I think there's still this feeling of nostalgia for stuff like that, in particular for Wave Race, because that game is so impressive to me. The water, the ripple effects on the water for the 64, and then after that on the GameCube, I think it was still impressive. It's a game that I just like to look at it, to be honest. I like to see the effect of the water. It's just so... I mean, to see that on the 64 was really unexpected realistic. So I always had a soft spot for Wave Race in particular. And I think the closest thing that we had to that was with the Wii Sports Resort. I don't know if you guys played, but there was a minigame that was kind of similar, of course, with motion controls and all of that. But you could see that the ripple effect of the water was really similar to Wave Race. And I don't know, I'm trying to think about it right now, but I don't know if there's another game similar to Wave Race from other company right now. So I would say that Nintendo could still produce something like that. There's no substitute for that game.
Yeah, there's not a lot of I can't think of any, like jet ski racing games. I mean, I still love going to arcades when I get the chance, and if you go to an arcade, they have all those racing games that you can actually like sit on, like the rideable like things, And I've played one that's like Hydro Thunder. That's what I'm thinking of. if you go to the arcade, you can play a game called Hydro Thunder. That's basically very similar to Wave Race, but just way more over the top. You guys know what I'm talking about?
I think I already saw the machine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
same.
Yeah. That's the only thing I can think of. But yeah, it's it's also it's one of those things where I feel like there's not really like a ton of demand for that particular type of game. I could be wrong, but I feel like when it comes to racing games, people are mostly interested in, car racing games and, space flight games and things like that. I feel like, Nintendo fans would probably be interested in if Nintendo made a new Wave Race game, but I wonder if it would be big enough to, bring in a wider audience than just people who have nostalgia for that kind of thing.
I think Luis hit a really good point when he mentioned that they were focusing on the more, I guess, marketable characters, the Marios and the Zeldas and whatnot.
Yeah.
Because it's true that a lot of the series they've kind of stepped away from. Things like Excite Bike, Wave Race are more of the semi-realistic simulator-esque ones. And those are the series they kind of dropped in favor of trying to go into the more, not necessarily cartoony, but just very much, these are franchises with their own aesthetic. And they are very recognizable just at a glance. Like, Captain Falcon is not going to be confused with someone from any other, like, Forza or other racing game,
Right.
It is the face of the game. And I think that's, at the end of the day, that's ultimately related to how expensive it is to make games nowadays. Because it becomes hard to invest in those smaller projects, even if Nintendo still releases stuff like the Curb Dream Buffet that just came out, and it is a smaller game, but I think those games those smaller franchises, nowadays they are in a weird spot because there's not a huge public for that, but a lot of people still have some nostalgia, but at the same time Nintendo would have to invest some money. One of the ones that makes me the most sad is, Nicolas, you mentioned the Excite series. I was a big fan of Excite Truck on the Wii. It's such a fun game. But since then, after Excite Bots, that was also on the Wii, we never saw anything from the series. And at the end of the day, the series does not have a big face, a big name to it. So it has these weird spots nowadays, and we don't see, there's not a huge public asking for it. There's just a small number of people that really has some nostalgia, and it ends up in Nintendo's wardrobe.
Yeah, but like, to your point about how like they've kind of gone away from making these games that don't have their major characters in it, I think that is actually a little bit of I don't want to call it a mistake, but it's a shame because, I mean, don't get me wrong, like I love like, the Mario games, Zelda games, all the big IPs, it's great. But when we're getting, basically some new Mario spin-off every year, it's possible to like kind of get a little bit of fatigued. And I feel like even just back in like the 3DS days, Nintendo was still taking more risks and putting out some of these smaller games. Like, one of the launch games for the 3DS was Pilot Wings Resort, which is just like, such a weird, like, they would never make that game nowadays. And yeah, it wasn't like the most in-depth thing, but like they basically just took like the island from Wii Sports Resort and put in a bunch of flying activities on it, right? But like I love those little like games, those that are like quirkier and these smaller experiences. Like, imagine if like instead of us getting a new kind of multiplayer Kirby spin-off game this week, Nintendo just dropped like a $15 short Wave Race experience or something along those lines.
Yeah.
I mean, it would just add so much more diversity to their like portfolio of games that they're putting out, and I think it actually does have the potential to bring in more people who may not always care about Kirby. Blasphemy, I know, but
yeah, I mean
they have put out a few experimental titles now and then, but they've been very much smaller ones, like you said. I do not remember the names of them, but there was the one where you're like this little guy in an office and you have to use the tools to like get to objectives at a certain time. There you go. Yeah, thank you. Good job.
Good job.
There was the there was the Stretchers. That was another one they released, which was just kind of this smaller experimental title. And neither of them really have that kind of recognizable face, I guess. But they're still investing in these smaller experiments. And then on the flip side, you have... They still are doing larger tests because that's where things like Splatoon and ARMS came from. Like, theoretically, if they were going to make a kind of, like, fun party shooter spin-off, they could have just made it like a Mario spin-off. Like, Mario has a paint gun. But they did go all into that experimentation of, like, hey, we're going to try this with completely unique characters. And kind of similar situation for ARMS.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Especially with ARMS, I forgot about that game. I feel like a lot of people forgot about ARMS.
As most did, yes.
Yeah, ARMS is really good.
All right, well, we're getting off on a bit of a tangent here, but yeah, I like seeing them bring these back catalog games to Switch Online, and I wish there were just one like tier, and you don't have to do the separate expansion pass thing, but that's a whole different topic.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're interested in playing Wave Race 64, it is out on the Switch Online expansion pack now, and you can go, relive your nostalgia and enjoy those glorious late 90s, early 2000s water physics.
Hit those waves, bro.
Wow.
Hit those waves, exactly. All right, so we're gonna switch gears here. This came from Reggie himself. Reggie, as in the former Nintendo of America big boss. So he had an interview recently, and he mentioned that at one point Nintendo was working on a adaptive controller that would also be compatible with like Xbox and PlayStation. So they were all working together. And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, there's this piece of technology that came out a few years ago called the Xbox Adaptive Controller. And basically what it is it's this very kind of oversized controller with lots of big buttons and lots of extra buttons, and they can all totally be reprogrammed. It works with all types of accessories, and the idea is this is a controller that can be adapted so that folks with disabilities or just different types of physical challenges can still use this controller to play video games. So this news report was basically saying that Nintendo was working with Xbox and PlayStation at one point to develop a kind of controller that could be used with everything. At least that's kind of how I read it. He said he's not sure if it's still happening. It was kind of in progress 3 years ago, but he's not sure if it's still in development. I would love to see something like this personally.
Yeah, I mean, Xbox really, like you said, Xbox released theirs a few years ago, and I think people across the industry, regardless of company loyalty or whatnot, like, we can all agree that was a fantastic push. It was something that was very much needed, and it was great to see. And, it would be nice to see Nintendo have something like this as well, but it also just kind of brings the question of, if this was sort of a cooperation between those three major companies, what exactly happened there? Because Xbox already have theirs, so were the plans just kind of canceled and then Xbox went forward with theirs, or?
I wonder if Xbox was the one to bring all these companies together, because at least from my point of view, I think that would be the probable case, but maybe I don't know, because imagine those three working together can be a little bit complicated because they use different technologies and those consoles are so different. Not sure if they managed to get to a point where three different teams with representatives from all three companies are actually okay with everything that they decided, But even if the case that this partnership did not work, I wonder why each company didn't make one then. I think this is something like they should have. After Microsoft released that one, I think it should be example for all the other companies to actually do something like that. I don't know if I never saw something like that, but I don't know if other third-party companies also created stuff like that, like Hori and those companies that work with third-party controllers, because that seems to me like a no-brainer. I don't know exactly how much work would go into that, but after Microsoft published something like that, I would imagine that would be a no-brainer for other companies to also do the same thing.
Right. I mean,
yeah, I know there are ways to get like the Xbox adaptive controller. Like there's things you can buy to like kind of get it to work on the Nintendo Switch, but it's not like an official solution. So it is possible, like if that's a controller that people like, it is possible to use it with some other platforms. I'm sure it works with PCs just fine. But yeah, it would be nice, you know, if they were all able to collaborate and put together one device that could just plug and play between things. I mean, you know, I think people forget, but like there are really a lot of people out there in the world who could really benefit from something like that. And the thought has definitely crossed my mind, like, oh gosh, like I know like it would probably not be the most important thing, but like, man, like if something that like happened and I couldn't use my arm anymore or whatever, like I'd never be able to play video games again or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So I feel like it's an important area to invest in, but yeah. And it almost seems like an area where Nintendo should be a pioneer, because if anyone has been willing to experiment with controllers and peripherals and technology over the years, more than anyone, it's been Nintendo.
Yeah, and I think because here with Nintendo, it's funny because the Wii, from a point of view, the Wii was a huge upgrade for accessibility, because a lot of people that didn't understand how video game work could just, it was way easier to understand, make some movements. But there's also people who can't move to play video games. So a lot of Wii games you couldn't play without movements. And something that I really liked about the Switch era, every single game that requires movements, that requires controls, there's also the option to use normal buttons. For example, Skyward Sword, I think it's the biggest example. It was a game that many people didn't play on the Wii. Not only people that needed more accessibility, but also people that didn't want to play a game of like 40 hours of gameplay moving all the time. So it's nice to see that right now on the Switch, Nintendo is actually trying to implement all that stuff. Of course, there are some exceptions like Switch Sports, for example, but the more that they try to be accessible, ARMS, for example, you can play with buttons. So it's also great to have the option.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that is a factor of aiming for accessibility versus just making sure that the game is easily playable in both handheld and docked.
Oh, yeah.
Because I imagine that's also a big focus.
For sure, yeah. Switch Lite, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah, and I also remember like back when Splatoon 2 came out, like some people were upset because when you were playing in handheld mode, you still had to use the motion controls, like to like gyro aim. I don't know if they ever patched
yeah,
that
no,
out,
that's a setting. You can disable it on docked or handheld.
Yeah, it's annoying to use on portable modes, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know if we'll ever see this thing, but it's interesting that at least Nintendo tried. It's not often we see a big partnership between those three companies.
Have we ever seen one?
I'd like to see more of that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we ever have.
I think they are together on stuff like Earthby and the rating, but working together I never saw.
Yeah. Well, it's never too late, Nintendo. If you're listening, get out there, do some good. All right, this is kind of an important topic that we wanted to touch on because we spend a lot of time on the show talking about video games, talking about things that are exciting, but it is important for us to acknowledge some of the broader things that are going on in the industry. And so we wanted to bring up this report that came out from Kotaku. It was about a little over a week ago. And this report was basically detailing some experiences that employees and mostly contractors have been having at the company with sexual harassment, mostly women, and really just brought to light a lot of issues that I think need to be a part of the conversation. You know, no company is infallible to these things. You know, we're not specifically trying to like pick on Nintendo here, right? But these issues are, you know, pretty broad across the industry, unfortunately. And that's not even necessarily something that everyone needs to be debated. Like, you can just look at the news headlines over the last couple years and, you know, whether it's Ubisoft or EA or, you know, like all these companies are having these types of challenges right now. So I think it's good that they're being brought to light. I won't go over everything here, just because there's a lot to go over. I would really recommend that people, if you're curious over what is going on at Nintendo of America, to go check out the Kotaku article. But basically, the long and the short of it is that a lot of they spoke with quite a few women who were working with Nintendo as contractors, and one of the big issues was that when they were encountering experiences that were inappropriate for the workplace, particularly sexual harassment allegations, they were not able to get the issues resolved because they were contractors, right? So, like, for example, there was one story that was saying this woman was working as a contractor, and a Nintendo of America employee was acting in an unprofessional way and, you know, being very, like, sexually, like, inappropriate with her in the workplace. And she wasn't even really able to get that resolved because he was a employee and she was a contractor. That's just one example. There's a lot of other examples in this report. Some were saying that, you know, in order to advance in the company, you had to kind of like get in with the male coworkers at Nintendo of America, to kind of, you know, have an opportunity to, you know, be hired on full time and, you know, beyond just the level of like what people would consider networking. So there's a lot to go over, but I wanted to just bring it up for discussion a little bit, and just kind of, you know, acknowledge that it is important that these things are shared out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's unfortunate that all that stuff happened, but it is positive that people are coming out and talking about their experiences. It all started a while ago when we saw the first reports about the experience that some contractors had with Nintendo. And after that, I think a lot of people would be more open to talk about their experiences. So that's the reason why it is always positive to bring that to light. And of course, it demands a lot of courage to expose all that stuff, but it's the only way that people will actually be aware, and the company will try to solve that, because I assure you, no company nowadays wants to have their image related to that kind of stuff, to sexual harassment, to that toxic kind of workplace. So when people are opening about that, when they are talking about that, they are guaranteeing that in the future stuff like that probably won't happen again, and the ones responsible for that behavior will not continue on the company. So that's the main reason why it is important to see stuff like that. I see some comments on the internet like, why they are reporting that? This is no proof of anything. But the fact that people are talking about their experiences is when the company will start to investigate, when the authorities will start to investigate to actually learn what happened, because clearly there's something wrong. Right? I mean, this is not the first report that we are getting about that. So my biggest hope here is that they will be able to solve solve those problems to guarantee a better work environment, because sadly, and as Nick said, in those big companies, this is almost inevitable sometimes. A lot of the time, we'll see people in power that treating people in a way that they shouldn't be treated. So sadly, this still happens nowadays, and the only way to stop that thing, stuff like that from continue to happen, is to expose all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Nintendo of America specifically, at least, just seems to have a big problem with how they treat their contractors and how they're how they interact with that general contracting company. I don't know if it's just that they are way too hands off, or there's like a lack of proper communication happening there, but it's clearly a problem. This is the second report that we've gotten about big issues like this. Hopefully there won't be a third. Hopefully there haven't been enough problems that there's going to be a third, but it's something that definitely needs to change in the company. And I hope that Doug Bowser has already addressed this, which, I mean, makes sense. You wouldn't want that going on without being able to have some kind of statement. But hopefully that between this and the other report that happened, they are actually going to try and change something. And that, this kind of environment is not going to be perpetuated, because it's no good. It's really not what you want.
No, it is important to note that Doug Bowser did issue like an internal statement to the employees, and basically he did say that they're taking the allegations very seriously, they're actively investigating them, and that is good to hear. I mean, we've heard those kind of words before, and sometimes it doesn't lead to meaningful change, unfortunately. It's easy to say, oh, we're going to make a change. But the real proof will be how many more of these reports do we get. And I know it's not necessarily like a fun thing to talk about or anything, but it is extremely important because the more that we give these people a means to communicate like what's going on with them, that's how change can happen. And I think we all want to see, the people who are making some of our favorite video games, like we want to make sure that everyone is in a place where they're being treated safely and respectfully, and
of course.
This does just make me hope that this is an NOA issue. I'm hoping that this is not issues that people are having across the board, like in both Nintendo of Europe, Nintendo of Japan, and that it's just being kept hush hush. Hopefully, it's just something that's affecting this particular branch, and they can get that resolved.
Yeah.
I
hope
it's hard
so
to say.
too.
I haven't seen anything about the other Nintendo branches. I have heard in the past that like the work culture at the Nintendo of Japan offices is particularly tense and not always the most like healthy place to work. But that was a couple years ago, and so I don't want to make any.
I'm pretty sure that in the old days, up until maybe to the GameCube era, Nintendo Japan had a lot of crunch for sure, and not only Nintendo Japan, but in the gaming world, I think this was almost the norm. But from what I've heard more recently, there was, I don't know, a couple of years back, 3 or 4 years back, there was a kind of interview that they did in Japan, and Nintendo of Japan was like one of the best places to work in Japan, was considered one of the best places to work. So, and we also heard a lot of things from Monolith Soft about the work environment, and apparently it's also a healthy place. They try to avoid crunch and stuff like that. So we have these reports, but it's always weird to understand exactly how it works in Japan, because the referential that they have for what is crunch and what is working time is very different from the West, because crunch culture in Japan is really, really strong. But considering other companies in Japan, I think Nintendo of Japan, from what we heard so far, has a positive workplace.
Yeah, it's hard to like make, you don't want to make any like, crazy claims about anything, because it's not like we've ever worked there necessarily. All we really know is what we get from this reporting. But just in general, I think the game industry is kind of at a point where a lot of these major companies are being made aware that, hey, there are ways that we can improve.
It's the moment for change.
Yes. It is a time where we're seeing more and more people talking about how we can make change and how we can make this whole game production environment healthier for our employees, and that's really important. And as someone who lives in America, I think there's a lot of room in general for our country's work culture to improve and value the person more than the product. That's just my personal opinion. I'm lucky enough to have a job where I'm treated very well, but I know that's not the case for a lot of people. So I think it's great that this is being brought to light, and hopefully we see some positive changes at Nintendo soon. All right, so I don't want to end the show on a bit of a heavy topic like that. So we're gonna bring up just one more thing that just came out just right before we recorded this episode, which is not usually the case. Normally, what happens is we're covering things that happened like a week ago, just because of how our podcast timing works. But Nintendo just dropped a new Pokémon trailer on this beautiful Sunday morning, and didn't reveal a ton of new information. We did get to see a new Pokemon called Cyclizar, which my first thought was like, oh my gosh, is this another motorcycle type Pokemon? But it's like, is that the theme for this game?
Pokemon type.
It's like a lizard. Yeah.
We're just gonna have like all the different vehicle types, in our Pokemon game. So we're gonna have the motorcycle type Pokemon. We're gonna have the airplane type Pokemon. Actually, I'd be totally down for that. That'd be super fun. Let's petition to make a vehicle-themed Pokemon game as the next generation.
Pokemon Racer?
Pokemon carts? Yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I'm thinking like you'll have like Pokemon gasoline and Pokemon diesel. That'll be the two versions, two different types of fuel.
I mean, that would be
anyways,
fun. Yeah.
Not too much in the trailer. They did show off some new moves. So there's a new like a shed tail move that I guess lets you create like a substitute Pokemon and then like swap places. So you're like making a decoy basically. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah,
this game is a better like a battle overall.
Yeah, this was released, I think, because of the Pokemon Championships happening this weekend.
Yeah.
Or I guess last weekend, technically. So, it makes sense they would have a trailer that focuses more on the competitive aspect. If you're more casual, this is probably going to be just a, neat kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
a new Pokemon.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, for a competitive
Beautiful.
aspect, it does seem like this is adding quite a lot. This is something they kind of focused on a bit more, kind of in Gen 7 with Sun and Moon, but especially in Gen 8 with Sword and Shield, where they've added a lot of new options in terms of moves and items that have a lot of utility for competitive play specifically. And this just kind of seems like an extension of that. A lot of what they're doing is stuff that, hey, they're showing like, hey, this is stuff that specifically when you're playing against someone else, you can use this to try and gain an advantage. Like the type
Yeah.
changing from terrestrializing.
Right.
Yeah, to be honest, this trailer, I think, to me, it showed the parts that I'm least excited about this game, which is the battle.
Yeah.
Because it just looked exactly like the battles looked in Sword and Shield and Sun and Moon.
Yeah, it's Pokemon.
Where-
What do you expect, Luis? Come on.
I mean,
Improvement? No.
the
No.
thing that I don't like is like waiting for the text to appear so the next thing can happen, because on Legends Arceus it was way snappier. The battles are super fast, are super like a modern JRPG, and now we go back to Scarlet and Violet and it is like, oh, it's super effective, oh, the Pokemon used the movements and the animation of the movement is like the same for all the 100 Pokemons in the game, so that the part I'm least excited. But the exploration for me is the thing that still makes me wanna play Scarlet and Violet.
I'm definitely with you on the exploration being the most exciting thing. And I agree with you that the combat is, obviously it's a much more traditional take on Pokemon combat compared to Legends Arceus, but I think I brought this point up back when we were talking about this game earlier, is that, it almost seems like the approach they're taking now is, we're going to have a Pokemon game for everyone, no matter what your interest is. If you want, the more kind of traditional combat style, great, check out our newest game that just improves the game as a whole, but still very familiar. If you want something a little more experimental, you can go try Pokemon Legends Arceus and get a totally different type of experience. Or if you just want to play Pokemon Go on your TV, just buy the Let's Go Pikachu game.
Or if you want something less polished, you buy Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl.
I'm content with what they are trying to do here. It's not what I want, but I understand that this is like what the Pokemon Company decided, and this probably is the most popular decision. Because we are talking about competitive play, right? They cannot change the battle system for competitive. Even Legends Arceus, I think it didn't had online battles, right? So
No.
to keep the competitive scene, and not only the people that play professionally, but there's a lot of people who love the meta in Pokemon, who love to play with all the system, to do shiny hunting and stuff like that I don't enjoy, but I understand that a lot of people love. So I can see why they don't make those drastic changes, and I'm okay with that. Like, I don't want to be, every time a new trailer comes out, I'm complaining because the game is not like I want to be, I'm okay already. I understand what they're trying to do, and I'm okay with it.
I do think you have a point, though, in that Arceus's battle system would not have transferred over smoothly. Like, they would not have been able to bring it over 1-to-1 because it just fundamentally doesn't really work in terms of a 1v1 scenario, like against another person. But I do think like you said, some of the smaller quality of life improvements, like having all the text happening at once, having like all the effects happening at once instead of having, 5 separate text boxes, that is something that they should definitely have brought forwards. And I hope that's something that they work on.
Yeah, I think that's just related to the fact that Scarlet and Violet and Legends Arceus were developed probably at the same time. So I don't think there were a lot of communication of stuff created in that game going to Scarlet and Violet. They're coming out in the same year.
Yeah, that's an interesting theory, especially considering just how completely different they look. Like, I almost wonder if they're even running on the same engine. It's honestly hard to tell. But Luiz, we didn't actually get a chance to talk with you after that big Pokemon Direct recently. So what's your your overall impressions of Sword and Shield? Are you excited for it? What you mentioned you're most excited for just exploring?
Yeah, like as I said before, that's basically my whole opinion about the game. I'll definitely buy it day one because open world Pokemon for me is a no-brainer. I think the thing that I liked the most about the last trailer was the fact that we are going to have 3 different stories that you can make in the route that you want, and you also can make the gyms in the route that you want. So to me, that's the most exciting thing because it feels that the game is actually open, full open. Like, for example, I'm not talking open like Xenoblade, where it's a game with big vistas, but it is a linear adventure. I think it's truly open. Like, for example, Breath of the Wild, you can go wherever you want in any moments of the game, and that's, to me, it's kind of groundbreaking for Pokemon. So I'm really excited about that. What I'm not so excited is more of the technical parts of the game, how the game looks. I think it still looks a little rough on some bits. If it is completely open, I'm okay with it looking not that good because it is still being impressive. And the battle system too, I'm not so fond about, as I already said. But overall, I am excited to play the game, and I'm going to go with an open mind to it. Hopefully. Oh, and the stuff with the Pokemons becoming a motorbike or becoming flying, I love that. To me, that's the best thing. I want to explore the world in that way. So to me, that's awesome too. But yeah, I think I'm more excited to it than was, for example, for Sword and Shield. But I still have some stuff that I'm not completely sold.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I mean, there's always going to be areas where, we're adding in a lot of innovation, but then, other areas kind of take a step back or don't really see that same level of moving forward. Personally, like, it's been a long time since I've, like, picked up a Pokemon game on day one. I remember the last Pokemon game that I really, like, sunk my teeth into for a good amount of time was Pokemon X on the 3DS. I totally missed out on Sword and Shield, and so I'm this might be the game that I actually pick up right when it comes out, and because I'm with you, Luiz. I think overall I'm excited about the new things they're bringing, and I know Nicolas has some reservations about the open world gym structure, but I don't know. Maybe it'll all work out.
It's about the leveling stuff.
Yeah, the fact that it doesn't seem scaled properly.
But that's confirmed?
I mean, they did not explicitly say it is not scaled, but there were leaks that have been correct so far that said that, and I think a blurb on the site said that you can choose to fight stronger gyms first, which implies not having any scaling.
Maybe that can work, but I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I hope the game's good, even if I have my reservations. Obviously, I don't want the game to be bad. I want it to be, impressive and actually groundbreaking. I'm just gonna wait out. I've been burned on Pokemon enough that I want to exercise a degree of caution.
I mean, that's always the good call. You never want to let the hype train derail.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, that just about wraps up the news segment of our show. Thank you to everyone who has been listening to us all this time. But before we wrap things up, we're going to go into what lately has been a very predictable segment, what we've been playing. Like Nicolas, I just feel like we should maybe just skip over you because I think I already know what you've been playing. But
well, I mean, I might have new things to say.
Oh, okay, all right. Prove me wrong, Nicolas. What have you been playing?
I played like 2 hours of Salmon Run in Splatoon 2 last night, so take that.
3 hype.
Yeah, I mean, just playing occasionally with a friend, trying to get back into it. Maybe grinding some ranks in preparation. Skills. Yeah, since, ranks do transfer over to some extent if you have Splatoon 2 save data. I've been playing a little bit more of that, just, maybe you can start a little bit higher in Splatoon 3, and it's exciting, and the game's still fun. But yes, otherwise it's been all Xenoblade 3. I did beat the game yesterday though, so that's been exciting.
Wow, congrats. I'm clapping over here.
That's a very good game.
Is it, so all said and done, how much time do you think you spent in that game, in Xenoblade 3?
I don't know if I should divulge that information.
Really? Because you think we're going to judge you, or because
I don't want to reveal?
I mean, okay, roughly 120 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, that seems right.
I did do basically every single side quest I possibly could before finishing the story. To the extent that after beating the game, I think I only had like 4 quests left to do. So I played a lot beforehand. And now
honestly, Nicholas, I'm jealous mostly. I'm jealous. I wish I had that much time to burn through a massive RPG like that so quickly. I don't think if I were gonna spend 120 hours on Xenoblade Chronicles 3, it'd probably take me like a good, I don't know, 3 or 4 months to get through.
Wow.
Yeah, I
can
lucky.
see that.
The only thing.
It landed in a period of time where I was not very busy, so really got to sink some time into it.
That's the best feeling ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to, because now that I know that Nicola finished the game, I'm very close to finishing it. I didn't finish yet because I'm doing the ridiculous number of side quests.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm with 80 hours now, and I just want to say to folks listening that I'll probably record a discussion with Nicolas full of spoilers. And I think it will. Everyone. I think it will come out in the first week of September. So people that are looking forward to know our overall opinions about the game. Oh my God, the mystery. We like the game. But if you guys are interested in hearing our full opinions, probably in the first week of September, we'll be publishing a discussion about that. And
all right.
Yeah, Nick. Yes, I've been playing Xenoblade 2, Xenoblade 3 as Nicholas, and not a lot to add. I'm trying to think if I played any other thing, but I don't think so.
Why would you?
Oh, I no, I didn't play anything else. I was going to those things, but yeah.
So you got me all excited there for a minute, Luis. Well, I have been playing. I've been stepping out of my comfort zone lately and tried some different things. So one of the games I've been playing this week was Pokémon Tournament, because that game here in North America.
I wanted
at least,
to play that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's having a free trial through Switch Online, which I was like, finally, gosh, a game trial I'm actually interested in.
Finally, some good food. Yes.
Exactly. Not to say that there have been some good games on there in the past, but a lot of them, they're not games that I feel like I can really experience in like a week. I'm sure that's the point, right? They want you to try the game and then buy it. That's not how I want to use the game trial service. I want to download
I just want
game.
Free stuff.
Blockbuster.
Basically, I want to play as much of it as I can and either finish the game or feel content with my experience that I don't need to play more of it. And that's kind of where I'm at with Pokémon Tournament. I feel like Pokémon is the right way to say it, right? It looks like Pokken, but
yeah, it's because it's Tekken, so I think so.
I know. Okay, well, anyways, I really enjoy fighting games. I'm not particularly good at them, but I really enjoy just like feeling like a powerful badass who's just like throwing people around an arena and this game it's great for that. There's like some 20 different Pokemon to choose from, and they all have just totally, unique movesets as you'd expect, and they all feel very different to play. The big thing that I didn't realize going into this game was it's actually kind of a hybrid between like a 2D fighter and a 3D fighter. You actually kind of switch between the two.
Yeah.
Certain moves kind of transition it. So I've really been enjoying the actual gameplay. There's not a lot of like meaty single player content though, and that was kind of what kept me from picking up this game back when it came out. Was I was like, oh, it'll be a fun novelty, but nothing that I'm gonna sink dozens of hours into. I'm not that type of fighting game fan. But yeah, in that way, it's been perfect for the Switch Online trial because I was able to check it out a little bit, get a taste of it, be like, okay, that was fun, and then now I don't have to think about it anymore. So.
Yeah, I remember I played the game on Wii U mostly. The single player was actually fairly long to get through, but it was just very tedious because it was all just very little story, just do a fight, do a fight, do a fight, do a fight. So it got pretty boring pretty fast.
Well, yeah, you're working your way up these leagues, but yeah, it's pretty much just the same battle structure just over and over again. And I wouldn't mind that so much, but one thing I really don't like about this game is, so you just like in a Pokemon game, right? You level up your Pokemon kind of over time. And I get why they did that, but in a fighting game, I don't really like that because in a fighting game, I want to switch between the playable characters as much as I want to, and feel free to like try all their different movesets. But this game really incentivizes you to like stick with just a few and level them up as much as you can. So then it's like, okay, well, not only are you just doing the same thing over and over again, you really don't have much of an incentive to switch characters. It's just going to make some of the late game battles even harder because you're starting from a level 1 character, so
yeah.
But that's just my take on it.
Right. I mean, for what it's worth, at least the game's fun. Like, it's generally a pretty solid fighting game. I've heard that it has pretty solid online. You can find matches very quickly.
The graphics are also nice. I like the overall vibe of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks great on the Switch. Yeah, it was a great port.
A fun recommendation that I would make. I played only the demo. I remember liking the game because I'm a big fan of Tekken, so I was hoping that the game would be a little bit more similar, but I didn't get very used to the 2D, 3D stuff, the transition thing. But I remember having fun with the demo. A fun thing to do is that a lot of the animations in this game are from the Tekken games. So you can search on YouTube comparisons of the animations between Tekken and Pokémon, and it's so funny to see Pikachu doing the movements of those super macho characters from Tekken.
Yeah, they just made Pikachu a Mishima.
Yeah, it's super fun to see the comparisons.
I'm gonna have to look that up. That's amazing.
It's great.
See, that tells you, like, I'm not, like, that deep into the weeds, because I was like, oh, wow, these are, like, all really cool Pokemon animations, but that's funny.
Well, because it's made by the same, I believe, it's made by Bandai Namco. I don't know if it's the same dev team as Tekken, but they borrowed a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I think Lucha Pikachu has the animations of King, the wrestling character. Obviously, Pikachu is Mishima. There's a whole bunch of like.
It's funny to see some of the adaptations. Like there's a characters who can shoot lasers from his eyes, and then they give his movement to Charizard, and instead of shooting lasers, he shoot fire. So it's fun to see the differences.
Yeah. So yeah, that was kind of my main, just kind of like, give it a shot game this week. The other game I decided to check out. So this game was originally kind of marketed as like an Xbox kind of indie game, but it did eventually come to Switch. 12 Minutes. Are you guys familiar with this game at all?
I played this one. I played with my girlfriends.
Oh, you did? Oh,
it's the one in the room where things start to repeat, and you have to get out of the loop.
Yeah, it's the time loop game.
Yeah.
One of many time loop games actually. Yeah, I wanted to check it out because I'd always kind of heard mixed things about it, but the premise just always seemed really interesting to me. And, they marketed it pretty heavily just being on, like, the voice cast. And I will admit, like, the voice acting in the game is really good. But I think this game has just kind of cemented something for me, which is just that I really can't get into this, like, time loop structure for games. I don't know what it is. I think for me it's just kind of just the inherent just repetitive nature of it. Like even like I tried I played Outer Wilds, which is like also kind of similar. It's a time loop game where it resets every 15 minutes or so, and like both of these games are like super creative, but the actual like structure, like the idea that like failure is part of the experience and you have to, you know, kind of accept that, it's just, I don't know, man. It just, maybe I'm just not smart enough for it, but I just don't enjoy that structure.
Yeah,
did you enjoy it, Luis?
No, I was just going to say that you probably hate Majora's Mask.
Yeah, I've avoided it for all these years because I don't feel like I would enjoy that kind of structure. I've just been like, great, I ran out of time. Now I have to go do all these things again, and yeah.
About 12 minutes. I'll be honest. I was playing, and by the half of the game, me and my girlfriends, we got really frustrated because we couldn't find out what we had to do, so we searched on the internet.
Just only 6 minutes in.
No, the game has more than
12 minutes. Yeah.
The game has more than 12 minutes. And by the end of it, I was not super satisfied with the story. Like, some of the plot twists were kind of cool, but some of the stuff was also, I don't know, the game felt... something about the game is that it felt like a PC game, the way that it plays. So it was a little... To repeat all the stuff was a little exhausting sometimes. And I think it was okay. I was expecting a little bit more from the story. With all the mystery surrounding it and all of that.
Yeah. I love seeing the experimentation. But yeah, and I'm kind of with you, Luis, though. Like, when I get to the point in a game where I feel like I can't figure out a puzzle on my own without looking like at a guide or something, that's when I'm like, all right, you know, like I'll do it every now and then, like, because sometimes you're playing a really good game, you're really immersed in it, you come across a puzzle, you just can't figure it out. You know, that's one thing. I don't mind that as much. But when I feel like I'm just having a hard time wrapping my brain around like most of what's going on, and I feel like I have to like dig deeper into a guide and be like, then it's just not fun anymore. You know, it almost feels like a chore. But again, that could just be me just not being smart enough for.
And you had to do all those specific stuff in the specific days, in the specific moments, in a chain of events.
Right.
Maybe it's my brain, but I don't know how a person could discover all of that by itself.
Well, and I will say that like the controls for that game, they really don't do it a lot of favors. Because it looks like the type of game where you just be able to like move around normally, but it's really more of a point and click. But on the Switch version, my understanding is you can't even like use the touch screen. So I'm like, okay, well that's great. But yeah. Anyways, tried it, wasn't for me, but you know, that's part of what gaming is all about, you know, stepping outside your comfort zone, trying some new stuff, and can't win them all, right? All right, well, I think that just about wraps up our show for the week. Thank you so much for everyone who has been tuning in all this time. This has been episode 22 of Nintendo Everything Refresh. If you like what we've been putting together for you every week, please spread the word. Share the show out with your friends. We're always welcoming new listeners to our exciting weekly show. And if you are listening to us on YouTube, we are also on all of the streaming platforms. We're on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, you name it. We also do have a new download link that is working, so if you prefer to download our episode directly to your phone or whatever, there's a link in the description where you can do that. And please just let us know what you think. We are always open to suggestions. If you have any questions for us, anything you want us to talk about on the show, just let us know. Our show email is always available and always accessible. So that about wraps it up. Thank you so much, and everyone have a great week. We will be back at you soon with everything new and exciting in the world of Nintendo.